Hey guys, I'm Mustached here, aka Mustached, here to review the series Dead End Paranormal Park. If you end up enjoying this full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, second and third to help out with my Patreon and PayPal where you can help support me and the channel directly, and fourth to my Discord server where you can join and find other smaller YouTubers and collab and talk and share and all that good stuff. And shilling will be reminded at the end of the review. With all of that out of the way, let's get into Dead End Paranormal Park. Now, to be quite frank, I didn't even know that this show was a thing at all. In fact, I was watching another YouTuber cover it with a guest appearance of the creator of the show, talking about their experiences of getting this into Netflix and so on and so forth. And it was rather enlightening to see. It's always really, really enlightening to see those little, interviews and stuff like that. So, I figure I would do a little bit more digging before getting into the show myself. And before I go into the plot, one of the very first videos I found, this is true, I won't name the creator, but the creator this came out before, all I will say is it came out before the show even began, and the person who was reading over articles was deciding whether or not to give the show a shot in the first place, whether or not to give this show a watch or not, essentially. And I kid you not, the moment this individual learned that the main character was a trans character, he said, "It is woke, therefore it must be bad." And that's me paraphrasing, by the way. So, it has come to my attention that woke is just literally replaced diversity now. One for one. There is no distinction between those two words anymore, as far as I'm concerned. There is literally no difference anymore. I thought there was, but no, that's not the case anymore. It literally means a character of a specific representation, whether that be in the LGBT plus community, or any other diverse character, period, I guess. So, yeah, this person said, "No, I'm not watching it because it is woke, therefore it is bad." And that really got me thinking, yeah, there are people out there on YouTube who I've watched who have said, I'm sick and tired of, these people in the big media taking previously established characters and turning them gay or turning them bi or turning them into something else that they weren't originally. Now, I can sort of understand that criticism because there's a big nostalgia factor to that I think that should be, there is a value to that already. However, this is a new product, a new thing that came out. It's relatively new. It's in season 2 as far as I know. And this person, as I mentioned, literally said because it had woke characters or diverse characters that it was going to be bad, despite it being something new. So now I'm really convinced that there is seriously no winning. As much representation as we've been getting, which, by the by, the Owl House is, has come back in season 3, despite what Disney has done in packing season 3 into a significantly shorter thing. But at least there was that. Outside of the Owl House, we have Has Been Hotel on YouTube, and we have its counterpart, Hell of a Boss. Outside of that, in Dead End Paranormal Park, I actually struggle to find any other shows currently that are, then maybe I'm just not looking hard enough currently, but that has representation, and more importantly, good representation, because I have clearly stated in the past that there is bad examples of representation. I'm not here to say, again, I'm here to be objective. If your representation is weak, I'm going to call it out, despite the results that got you there. I'm talking about the end results of the show, what is in the show, what is, depicted, which is why I consistently, one of the first examples I'll always point to is Korra. I'm sorry, Korra fans, but it is true. Again, and that's just talking about the show, not any of the comic things that came out after. So, yes, with that preamble out of the way, let us get into Dead End Paranormal Park. Alright, apologies for the cut there, but nonetheless, we can dive into the plot section of Dead End Paranormal Park now that I have established that, yes, this show does depict a trans character as the lead character, which, to be fair and honest, I have actually never seen a lead character be trans in a show before, at least personally. I've not seen any other shows that have that. I don't know, they're probably out there that exist, I just haven't seen them. So this is my first exposure to that, and as far as content goes. So this show is genred as a comedy horror show, and we'll go over those two elements separately. And with that out of the way, we can talk about the general vibes of both Season 1 and Season 2, respectively. So we'll go over Season 1. So the general premise is that in Season 1 we follow our lead trans character Barney, who is going to work at this park, and he runs into Norma, who has also been invited to work at this park. They both end up in this invitation sort of ordeal where they are looking for the boss, and as little mysteries start to unpack, like what happened to certain other people within the park, it delves into a little bit of mystery and a little bit of demonology, as well as ghost and all of the creepy crawly stuff as such, which would cover the horror aspect. And for those elements, that does take up a good chunk of the plot. And yes, Barney being trans is important to his character, just as if you were a straight character in a romantic story, it would probably be a part of your character that you would be, for example, a guy who is interested in a woman. Or, if you were gay, you'd just be a guy who's interested in another guy. That's the only difference. And here, we just have a trans character who is attracted to another guy. So yeah, that is the only difference, is to whom you are attracted to. That is the only difference. But it is a part of the character, is what I'm getting at here. And that doesn't make it inherently bad, as to make a reference to, what I said at the beginning of the video. Because that could just be what people are. I can't believe I have to explain that in 2022. But apparently we shouldn't teach sex ed in school, though. Yet, people seem to not understand what trans people are either. And I'm targeting people who have made pretty stupid claims, such as led by Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh and all those folks on the right. Sorry to get a little political, but I mean, they are the ones who keep ranting and raving about this stuff, and we had a whole documentary come out from one of them, that being Matt Walsh, who was asking the question, what is a woman? And his definition was a 3-sentence word, which you could break that down even further, by the way, of what a woman is. And a woman doesn't necessarily have to do certain things to be a woman, is a part of that isn't really, in that little sequence at the end of his little documentary. But point being is that I find it odd that these are the people who want sex ed out of school, yet they ask people to, to define what is a woman, and if the answer is they're unable to answer that, then clearly they're unable to answer what a trans person is. Therefore, you would think that sex ed would be more necessary in school. People have no clue what these things are anymore, apparently, according to Matt Walsh. So it should be more required in school. We are severely lacking in sex ed, clearly. If people like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro can just say a man cannot become a woman and a woman cannot become a man, despite the facts don't care about your feelings, Ben Shapiro guy here, the fact that a trans, by original, if you were to take apart what that actually means, tran is a shorthand, by the way, for transition, for those of you who forgot. And the S is a shorthand for sex. Literally, for sex. Transition their sex. A man would transition their sex to female, and a female would transition their sex to male. Therefore, you can also transition your body in different ways, as our main character does in this show. As an example of that would also fall under the tree of current trans. That is not too complicated to understand, yet these people don't understand that. And I can't believe I had to explain that in a show that I'm trying to be objective about. But here we are. So yeah, beat that, Matt Walsh. Explain that one away. And I love the whole thing about it's getting to our, they're going after your kids. When clearly it has been shown that that is not the case, and they haven't been able to pull out any specific examples of that, by the way. But if you go beyond that, by the way, and I love this line, it's my favorite line because it's so obvious, and I hate when they do it. They say, all kids are stupid. That line to me has been a joke and a meme, because to me, there has always been an asterisk after that phrase, that all kids are stupid. The asterisk being that if they are all stupid, therefore they also must be the most spongiest to learn the most about the world. Therefore, it is actually the most eligible time to teach them about any given subject, which is why it's already been proven the best time to teach someone, say, a second language such as Spanish is when they are kids, as young as possible, because it becomes harder and harder to retain that type of information as we grow older. In fact, not only could kids do that, they already, and I would highly recommend watching this on YouTube and looking this up because doctors have already studied this, babies already have a moral compass that can be tracked. Babies. And yet, we're going to have people like Ben Shapiro say all kids are stupid. Yet, all babies already have a moral compass. And if all babies already have a moral compass, it could be easily assumed, since we have a part of our brain that explicitly thinks about all things sex, it's in the lizard part of our brains. Some people have, just called it the sex sphere part of the brain as well. That's what I would inherently call it. that would dictate to people, when it's activating, to whom you are attracted to. And if, according to their logic, if sex and gender are the same thing, by the way, which there are different aspects to these things, but if they were the same identical thing, which is what the right consistently tries to do, it would actually prove that babies would know more about sex than we give them credit for. If anything, wouldn't be the earliest example of babies learning about sex is when they feed on their mother's breast? The answer is yes. That would be the earliest example of they've been exposed to a thing that would be correlated to the gender and sex of a female. Of a typical female, anyway. So, it would actually align that babies understand things about sex already. As uncomfortable as that might sound, that is just true. That would be true, and it would start to develop further as they grow up. Therefore, you would have, when they are kids, they would get childhood crushes. And I can go over my own history. When I was growing up in middle school, I already had a crush. I already knew what that was. I was already starting to feel certain things for a particular girl when I was a boy. For example, that happened to me early on in my life. There wasn't any external force or, as they throw around the phrase grooming, that taught me this behavior. It was innate. It was in my brain. It was telling me this person is attractive. I am attracted to this person to some degree. There must be something happening. My heart beat is increasing. These things in my body are, my brain is getting all goopy. The words that are coming out of my mouth are, getting all tangled and all that. These are all things that happen in real life to kids. They get crushes. I'm baffled that we have such trouble understanding basic human biology. The thing that they keep claiming is the thing that they understand so much about, and yet they don't want to accept that kids already start to think about who they're attracted to. I'm sorry, but that's just the reality. And if you want to talk about sex ed, by the way, and keeping it out of the schools, despite it clearly needing to be in every high school, at the bare minimum, it needs to be in every high school. But if it's not going to be, then we should also not make it acceptable for kids to go to church either. I think that's the only fair assessment that I can come to, because if you can groom your kids to become gay, as they like to put it, then you can groom your kid to become a religious zealot just as equally. You can groom your kid to become a child soldier by giving them a soldier toy or letting them play soldier-based video games. You can groom your little girls by giving them baby dolls, which lets them grow up and that gives them ideal of motherhood, which is something we did the last two of those things throughout the 1990s, throughout most of our history of the 1990s. That was socially what was acceptable to do, in fact. I can't believe I also had to go through a short history lesson, but here we are. I'm sorry for the rant of, understanding the basics of humans. We can get back to the plot of this. So, now that we're back on track, we can talk about how in Season 1 it primarily focuses on the demon aspect of this. They're early introduced to this demon who's on the left side of the poster named Courtney while they're working there. And as I already mentioned, Barney openly admits that he is trans pretty early on in the show. However, what it does keep vague is that he does explain at the bare minimum that his, as he calls it, his Grammy-gram, wasn't accepted of him. And the parents are trying to bridge that gap, but they also didn't stick up for him at the same time. So they're sort of in this weird in-between place of like trying to get there and, you know, trying to be understanding and all of that stuff. So there's a little bit of in-between with the parents. So that makes them a little bit more complex rather than just saying it's just they're fully supportive or fully against him for being, well, him. But what is kept vague is what she said. We see a glimpse of it in this sort of nightmare sequence where we see various versions of the fears, and we see her pointing at him, but we don't know what she's saying. It's sort of muffled, and there are other noises that are coming out of this ghostly version of her while the parents just sit there in silence. So that is very clearly the attitude that they had during whatever was said. But I do respect that choice of what did you decide to directly tell your audience, which is just, yeah, this character is that thing, that being trans in this case. But the thing that we're going to keep under wraps is what was said. We're going to allow that to play in the back of your mind. Your mind can get to the to any number of bad conclusions, because it clearly ended bad, that would get you there. And as a result, Barney decides to live essentially at the park. Despite the whole demons and ghosts and other spooks that live there. And it is a sort of a double understanding of these two elements, because even Barney as a character isn't perfect, because there is a point early on as well where he kind of blindly does almost the same identical thing that Grammy Graham did to another character. I think it might have been Courtney, or might have been the talking dog, the dog who becomes a talking dog named Pugsley. I forget which of the two it was, but it was one of the two, and treating them in a very similar stance to, and it sort of eventually snaps into his brain that that was the behavior that, and then he wanted to avoid that, essentially. So, while that's going on, and while he's figuring out his own feelings, there is Norma, who is dealing with this sort of struggle to be with people in general. She seems to have a fear of people, like very inward, very awkward, socially inept, at least at the beginning, very focused, probably would decipher that she has some sort of I forget the initials of it, HD, the thing that where your brain like struggles in certain aspects, but you like excel at certain other things that might not be under the typical scope, is what I'm essentially trying to get at. So, in that regard, we have these two characters that are trying to both understand their own living situations while all these ghostly and demonic activities that are plaguing this park is essentially the two little plots that are sort of consistently hitting throughout season 1. And I will say that the comedy, since I've been talking about the horror just a little bit, the comedy is also really strong, which actually caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting this to be a comedy, and I didn't know that until I checked the genre thing. And seeing that it is a comedy, yeah, it totally fits that, because I legitimately laughed quite a number of times out loud from some of these just pure interactions Some of them being just what a character directly says, or perhaps it might have been a fourth wall break, which does happen from time to time, but these particular fourth wall breaks are really punchy and really clever, so better than Deadpool. I know that that's going to upset some people, but it's true. I never found the original Deadpool that good. You can see my rant on that if you want. My rant on that probably doesn't hold up as well because I've been trying to become more objective since a certain point, and I'm pretty sure that came out before that I was trying to apply more of a strict standard to myself in regards to review. Anyway, easily my favorite episode of the first season is a musical episode. And I have not seen one of these in such a long time. Now I want to make it clear, I'm not talking about a show where it's purely a musical, like nearly in virtually every episode, like something like My Little Pony, just to throw out like a Friendship is Magic iteration as an example of like what I'm referring to. Like a typical, every episode has some sort of song, or most episodes tend to anyways. At any rate, this show has more of a plot stuff, heavy stuff going on, and this particular episode is a musical, and I've not seen a thing like this since Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like a show that has, like, again, a typical plot, and then has that one episode that is a musical. And in that musical in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it really changed a lot of the dynamics, and it really escalated the level of where characters were going and what they were doing. And I would dare rival that musical to this one. That is how impressive this musical episode is. I am not joking when I say, damn, that was a good musical episode, if I have ever seen one. Like, they impress with a very vast range of musical numbers, from the typical, more typical and cliched love or crush type song, to the sort of I Want More song, but with a twisted lens on it. What that even means for Courtney, by the way. And dare I say, Courtney, throughout that particular episode, definitely goes through the most of the allotted characters in that little thing. The Pugsley song, where it's like between him and the thing that possesses him pretty much at the beginning of the show, which is like a demon, but only a portion of his demon part remains, so he's still able to talk. And they explain stuff later on, which I'm not going to spoil about that, but I'll leave it at that. He gets a little duet musical with his ghostly version and his self version that's like this whole, like, pretty jazzy-esque type musical, I guess I would call it. Again, a pretty well-ranged musical. Norma as well, singing her song about dealing with her idol being not the person she expected, aka essentially sort of a don't meet your heroine type song in this specific instance, as she has learned about this individual, the more messed up things this person has done, and again, this is someone that Norma looked up to, and having all of those issues sort of spill out in a musical form, and that song is absolutely an absolute crush, an absolute, like, damn, that song was just like, again, I would listen to that song on repeat. That's how good that song particularly is. Like, jeez. So, if anything, if I were to say, if someone were to come up to me and say, what episode would you, recommend I watch in a jump-in, I would say probably that one, but it would, again, be better with the setup of the little plot points that I've been going over vaguely. But definitely a episode to check out and really pay attention to, because it does change the dynamics a little bit here in the episodes by quite a few degrees. Barney establishing his crush into a full relationship with Logs, as he calls himself. And yeah, and dealing with all the relationship stuff and getting that back into the fix of things. And, so yeah, good episode. And it's right before the season finale of season 1, so it also sets up at the end of it how the season 1 finale will go about doing. And that also has quite a lot of escalation going on, obviously, as our sort of big bads come into the focus of the show and dealing with that. So I would say overall, season 1 was extremely strong, extremely solid, and I would highly recommend it already. So let's move on to season 2, and I'll again keep it as vague as possible. Though I will have to expose one detail because it's introduced rather early in season 2, which is the introduction of angels, which would fit this type of narrative since you already have demons, and it would make sense to have angels as well. And yes, I do recognize that in this particular show, at least the character we've see in this throughout this particular angel that we follow, named Fingers or Hands. I think his name is Fingers. Point being that he's sort of a more antagonistic character that has some plotting going on, and I mean something devious, but also pure, that sort of thing. Of like, what is justice, and asking those types of questions. So there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of dealing with Pugsley losing his powers at the end of season 1. That's sort of his jumping off point at season 2. We have Courtney trying to atone for what she did because she sort of fell under the manipulation of one of the main villains of season 1, and her dealing with that. And Norma sort of coming into her own as well, establishing her, getting her more comfortable with dealing with people in general, and starting to realize her own romantic potential, I guess, is the best I'll put that out there. For another character, and we see how that plays out here in season 2 as well. And yeah, the overall follows is that there's a lot more stuff going up above with the angels, and there is still elements with the demons. And overall, I would say this one is just as solid as the first season. However, I do have one criticism of season 2. And I am here to be as objective as possible, so I am going to call this one out. There is a particular episode where our fellow characters have to go to stop a party that the demons have all curled into another dimension that they do not belong in according to the angels, and they're having a party. So it's up to our group to stop the party. They're the party stoppers. So they get to the party, and they find out that the party is being held for the person that was trying to take over in season 1. And the secondary story is Courtney finds a demon that looks a lot like herself, and she's trying to follow this demon and trying to learn what she can about this other demon that looks like her. So while she's following this other demon, we have Norma dealing with her whole relationship confusion with Baja, I hope I pronounced that right, uh, and having her deal with the offset of what their relationship status is due to Norma expressing certain things here. And Baija is trying to help Norma in an overbearing way, is how Norma is perceiving this. And bizarrely, she's trying to hook Norma up with the demon that tried to take over the world. And they start talking on this bench, and they're a bit hostile at each other when we first see the first interaction between them, which is fine. And then, of course, we're cutting back to Courtney, and we're cutting back and forth. And at some later interaction between Norma and the villain from the season 1, they're suddenly laughing and being buddy-buddy. Yeah, I'm gonna criticize it and say that was completely rushed. You don't do that in one episode. That is just not so. You don't flip in one episode. I'm sorry. That's pretty lazy. So I am gonna have to call it out that was the laziest moment in season 2. And I know what people are gonna say. But yeah, I agree. It's a strong, arc. And there definitely have been stronger arcs of villains who became heroes, despite their egregious acts. You might be able to point to some of them. One of the characters people tend to typically point out in animation specifically is Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender, who has been following Aang and trying to stop Aang consistently, and then he finally starts learning more about his own side, and he's trying to question what side he's truly on, and eventually, after a whole ordeal, he wants to switch sides, but it's not that easy. It's not like he just goes up and they say, hey, we forgive you, and let's be all happy and chummy. No, he has to work with each of them individually, regain their trust, and, sort of build that back up. Another earlier example of this, in fact, before Zuko in animation, at least one that I remember very strongly, was Ken from Digimon Season 2. Ken was very much the Digimon Emperor. He was very abusive to Wormmamon, and then learning about what Digimon truly are, and going through that arc, and realizing the pain he caused, and, truly asking for forgiveness, and truly building those bridges back with the characters in a sort of groupish sort of way. If I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've seen Digimon Season 2, but I remember his character being really, really strong, especially when you start to learn about the loss he went through in the human world, which is, he went to the escapist route where he thought, these are just Digimon, they're just made of data, that's all they are, right? I could do whatever I want to these digital monsters because they're just data, that's all they are. And once he breaks out of that line of thinking, once he sees that these Digimon, they can get hurt, they have personalities, they have feelings, that they are very much alive, that is the moment of Ken realizing and rediscovering that he was hurt to such a degree, and he put himself in such a bad place in terms of trying to emotionally fix himself. So yeah, those are two examples that I immediately pull from, where I say it was a more overall process, whereas this seems to be resolved in, again, one episode. Seems like a little bit of a lazy writing moment there. if I'm being, again, completely honest and completely objective. I wish they built that up a little bit more. Maybe have that character, the one from season 1, be more relevant to season 2 before that episode, so we can have more of a build up, or have more interactions between those characters and have something to establish why they would get from point A to point C without, because they're clearly cutting the stuff in between here in this instance, to get us to that point where they're suddenly, again, buddy-buddy. But outside of that weak moment, I would say the rest of Season 2 is really solid. And that would conclude they have to deal with certain things up above instead of going down below this time around. And that would be the overall sentiment for Season 2. So, the way this Season 2 ends is that it ends with a very hook of, like, we really do want a Season 3, that it was very clearly established based off of the final moments in the final episode as well, overall. And so, I guess this is the part of the video. After giving my rating, I'll give my rating first. I would give this show a very high score. It's really good. It has a lot of comedy that's really strong. It has what it promises in the horror department. Lots of spooky little ghosts and goblins and other creatures of other sorts, doing all little creepy little things all throughout both seasons, by the by. So yeah, very strong in both departments. So I'm going to go ahead and give this show a 9 out of 10. Highly recommend it, by the way. So what would I hope to see in season 3 if they were to get one? And there is one thing that I would really, really want to see throughout season 3, instead of it being like a very one-note, one-episode sort of thing. And to be fair, it would probably have to be in the course of a new character. And this to me would fit the show's sort of dynamic, the show seems to, show us that there are good humans and bad humans. There are good demons and way less good demons, obviously. But so far, in Season 2, there seems to be a very suspicious and dubious two creatures from heaven. We've seen hands, or fingers, and we see this other figure that's controlling them. I don't know that character's name, because I don't believe that name is ever referred to in any of the episodes, but there's some mysterious figure at the end, and I think at one other point in the season, but again, kept very vague. And it seems to, as well as the angel themselves, it seems to put heaven in a very purely antagonistic way. Now, I get it. There are things to criticize about heaven. And, belief in God and all of that. I understand that. Trust me, I do. But I would be really impressed if, again, they introduced a new character that was a new angel, though. And what I would really like to see from this new angel character is a character that sees that this is happening and obviously doesn't agree to it. Clearly wants to make a change to the way heaven is, perceived, allowing the sort of robotic angels, what they essentially are, to be more individualized, but still angels, if that makes sense. Is like the whole thing that this particular angel starts to want to happen in of up above, or whatever they call it, if they don't directly call it heaven. I think they do, but I don't remember. Point being, it would be really, really interesting, based off of where this show is currently, to see a character that is from heaven and wants to see something change. And this would actually work as a sort of the second half of, say, a Zuko character arc without the first half of it. So a character that comes down from heaven, because they already have their suspicions from heaven overall, so the other characters would likely not trust this character inherently, because he came from a place that they just came from after this whole war broke out between all the demons, all the angels, and what's called fallen angels. And I'll just leave it at fallen angels and leave it at that for non-spoiler reasons. But, point being is that there would be a clear line of mistrust in this, and this angel in particular would have to convince them that they want true change, and they want to make a difference in heaven, and make it a, the place that people sort of inspire in their minds it to be, like this, dare I say, the thing that it should be, the heavenly place, like the, but still free place, is also the thing. It's definitely that is definitely a challenge in it of itself, right? Because there is this sort of thing that they push in this show a little bit here about the freedom of, characters, and this isn't the first show to do this explicitly, but it is a different, not different, but a engaging idea to think about, what does, human freedom mean? And yes, it does technically mean that people are free to be bad. That is something that is true when we have control of ourselves, is that we have the capability and, yes, freedom to do bad. That is the cost of freedom, but that is what we allow ourselves to do to also be free in the other sense of we're free to be our authentic selves, we're free to live our lives, we are free to make the choices that make us most happy. That, too, is a self-identifier of what it means to be free. And the cost and reward of those two things, because again, I think that is very clearly shown to us by the angels we do see in heaven, that they are very robotic, they are very strict and to the point, they're very one-noted, they're very, again, they seem very robotic in nature, and not in the sense of they are robots that even seem to have their own freedoms. It's like their freedoms were slapped into this one singular thing, as they are all depicted all the same way, except with the exception of the two other characters we see in heaven, but they're the bad ones, though. So, to me, it would make, from a design point-wise, this new character design significantly different. And yeah, that would probably need some sort of explanation. And I do have one, though as cheap as it is. My sort of insert idea here of a new character would be that they were someone who probably worked closer to the highest of powers, like under, because I don't think that the suspicious character is supposed to be God. That would be really weird, I think, if that were the case. Have this character, though, this newer character, work a lot closer with God, so this individual is not seeing what's happening throughout the rest of heaven for that part, for that whole section. So they're missing that level of context, and they're trying to, but they eventually see it. They eventually gain that context, which allows them to go, oh, this isn't what heaven should be. We ought to be more free, but still be pure to a degree as well. Like, good is the way I would put it instead of free. And I know that's a very broad word, but yeah. So I would think that that character would be really, really interesting to see. As I have already established, there are good and bad demons. There are clearly good and bad humans. So to me, it would only make a logical progression for a new character to be there, for there to be a good angel. So yeah, and yeah, if there was any chance, because I've already expressed my really big desire to voice act for Helluva Boss, though again I highly doubt that Helluva Boss would want to hire some small YouTuber. Again, the people they've been able to get on is a clear indication that they want really big celebrities to pop on, so they would never ask me to do a voice. Though that would be a dream of mine to do a voice for Helluva Boss during its run. So I'm very pessimistic about ever getting to do that. But yeah, I would put my ring in the hat. I would love to play this new character. I would love to play this sort of angelic character that wants change in heaven. I think that would be a really interesting character to play inserted into this story in Season 3. That is how strong I feel about this show. Again, I gave it a 9 out of 10 and a high recommendation. And that's my full review of Dead End Paranormal Park. If you ended up enjoying my full review, plus politics at the beginning of that, and I do apologize that I explained basic human freedoms and all that stuff, and political understandings and lack of sex ed, but here we are in the year 2022 where that's a big pressing issue, so those are my thoughts on it in one contained video. Anyway, again, if you ended up enjoying this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my petition to help out smaller YouTubers, second and third to my Patreon and PayPal, fourth to my Discord server. Any and all donations are greatly appreciated, and until next time everyone, bye bye!